Mankind has been trying to understand the universe since it was on the drying volcanic layers. We have produced countless hypotheses and theories to understand the planet we share with the creatures we have evolved from a common ancestor for millions of years, the solar system it is in, and beyond. Thanks to the hypotheses we produced, we started to understand the universe better. Some of these hypotheses we produced were nothing but nonsense. Some were masterpieces. During all this time, we became aware of a fact. Man's greatest friend in the process of understanding the universe was undoubtedly science. As I said, because some of the hypotheses we produced were ridiculous, science took its current form thanks to those ridiculous hypotheses and stories. So how did it happen? We saw that we could not observe some hypotheses and started to reject them. As soon as we started to accept things that we could not observe as unscientific, science began to develop more. Thanks to those ridiculous hypotheses, we learned what not to do, and eventually science got to where it is today. We have added some principles to science to obtain this information. Over time, we developed the scientific methodology. From this point on, science focused on obtaining a result, leaving aside the myths and religious beliefs that were offered before it with the dart in its hand. It didn't matter whether the results were in conflict with religions or not. The important thing was that human beings understand the universe. The important thing is to be based on logic and observation. With the arrangement of scientific methodology by the brightest minds, each discipline's own methodologies emerged, and these methodologies started to work with the least mistakes. We now know that the sun does not revolve around the earth, or that everything is not created from water. And we owe this to the brilliant minds who made logical analyses and developed the right strategies before us. The roots of science go back to approximately 3,000 lean years BC. It was possible to find traces of science in ancient states such as Babylon, Mesopotamia, and Egypt at that time. But science was far from being the science of today. Most importantly, it was not based on logic. For example, in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, diseases were known as the wrath of God or as being caused by evil spirits. The purpose of the doctors at that time was to identify the sins of the patient and to cleanse these patients from these sins. In this period, although there were doctors called as Sipu in Mesopotamia, who looked for the cause of the disease in physical reasons and looked more like modern doctors, these doctors were not preferred. Doctors in this period used methods such as magic and prayer in addition to drugs during treatment. The situation in India was different compared to other nations. Various forms of surgery, including repair of torn earlobes, perineal lithotomy, cataract surgery, and several other excisions and other surgical procedures, were found in the ancient text Su's Ruta Samhita. But everything would change completely with the Greeks. During the 26th Egyptian dynasty, the Nile was opened to Greek trade for the first time, and so the philosophers who went there were influenced by the ideas here. They used their new knowledge in fields such as philosophy, medicine, and astronomy. The process of explaining the supernatural laws with the laws of nature begins in Ionia. Around 600 BC, Thales of Miletus first developed the idea that the world could be explained without resorting to supernatural explanations. Thus, the Greek began to advance in science. I just said that in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the idea that diseases are caused by evil spirits prevails. But the Greeks refused. Hippocrates is considered the father of medicine for his contributions to prognosis, or the use of clinical observation, and the systematic classification of diseases. The Greek philosopher Anaximander, who drew the known world map on a plate, found the sundial, and put forward the primitive theory of evolution. He said that the sky revolves around the earth, that the sun is a burning fire, that the earth is not flat, and he is considered the founder of astronomy because of his ideas about the universe. The idea that the world is round is Pythagoras, one of the famous thinkers of ancient Ionia. Pythagoras also said that the earth moves around the sun. Pythagoras did not only say that the world was round, but also made great works in the field of mathematics and geometry. Again, Greek scientists such as Euclid, Socrates, Archimedes, and Aristotle influenced science and philosophy for hundreds of years with their theories. So what was the reason for all this? To put it simply, we know that there is no dominant religion. Of course, that's not all. The information they obtained from the cultures they traveled to diversify their cultures over time, enabling them to look at events from different perspectives. In the light of all this information, and because they laid the foundation of the science we know, we can call the starting point of science as ancient Greece. After the Greeks, the community that influenced science most effectively was the Muslims. The Muslims who conquered the Middle East in this period translated the ancient Greek books into their own language. Thus, science began to develop rapidly in the Islamic geography. The scientists who emerged in this period were making important developments in philosophy and science. Avicenna, known as the founder of medieval science and the leader of physicians, is also one of the most important scientists who grew up in the Islamic geography. Among the great array of scholars, Al-Haytham is considered the architect of the scientific method. The scientific methodology he established was developed over time and took its present form. The sciences developed by Muslims in this period were translated into European languages after the reforms in Europe and played an important role in the development of science in Europe. Although the Middle Ages were remembered as beautiful in Islamic geography, this situation was not the same for Europe. During this period, the European people were oppressed under the church and the feudal order. Development in medicine and science was very poor. Due to the diseases such as the plague spread by the Mongols and the lack of hygiene, most of the people were affected by such epidemics. Due to the lack of development of medicine, even the smallest diseases could result in death. In addition, due to the Pope's frequent crusades against the Turkish and Islamic threat from Asia, the people could not develop financially and socially. After Europe's invention of the printing press and successful reforms led by Martin Luther, Europe emerged from the Dark Age. After this period, Europe clung to science, never to let go again. During this period, colonization efforts began in Europe, and in a short time, Africa influenced the whole world in the long run. With the financial power they gained from here, Europe became a pioneer in science and technology in the world. The Cape of Good Hope and the Strait of Magellan were discovered during this period. Thus, spices and other materials, which were extremely expensive and inaccessible due to the taxes imposed by the Muslims, became easily accessible. At the same time, the theory of evolution, the American continent, and the discovery that the world is round were also included in the scope of maritime activities. But despite all these developments, the church still had not completely lost its power. They still did not accept scientific developments that were contrary to their own beliefs and excommunicated those who said it. During this period, famous scientists such as Kepler and Copernicus Galileo were punished for not being in favor of the church. At that time, the idea that the earth was flat and that the sun revolved around the earth was widespread. The general consensus was Aristotle's world-centered view. In this case, it was not an ordinary behavior for someone to say to all the authority that you are wrong. In fact, the earth revolves around the sun, and it demanded serious courage. But whether you call him God or the universe, he sends some people to the world, and these people show us the right way by saying that you are wrong. Galileo was undoubtedly one of these brave people. Europe was not yet a fully illuminated place when Galileo expressed these ideas, and at that time it was hardly an understatement to say that the earth revolved around the sun. Galileo was prosecuted in 1632 for these bold words. 17 years ago he was ordered not to defend his theory. The judges felt that he should be punished, but they said that if he said that Copernicus' theory was wrong, he could avoid the harshest punishments. On the second day of the trial in 1633, Galileo gave up and asked for forgiveness. Galileo was old and weak, so he had no strength to resist. The court gave him a deed to sign. Galileo agreed in desperation and read this document in public, stating that the earth does not revolve around the sun. The pain of ignoring science probably came to him more than any other physical pain. Despite Galileo reading this article, the court still sentenced him to house arrest. But despite his tired and old body, he did not give up on science until the last moment. During this period, he wrote the book Two New Sciences and secretly published it in the Netherlands. Even though the bigoted clergy imprisoned his body, he could not imprison his ideas. Especially after Newton, science began to develop incredibly quickly. In the same period, inventions especially in the sciences almost chased each other. A lot has changed in the world in the last 500 years. If we told people of ancient times to imagine utopia, they probably wouldn't even be able to imagine this much. People at that time could not have imagined that a man on television could address everyone at the same time, and that distances that would last for months could be traveled in a few hours. We turned flying carpets into airplanes and talking mirrors into phones. Items that we found 100 years ago now work near perfect today. In the last 100 years, we have become aware of the incredible power that has emerged with the splitting of the atom, and we have used it sometimes to our advantage and sometimes to our detriment. For the first time thousands of years after man had lived on dried volcanic layers, he had the power to destroy the world if he wanted to. For the first time, we managed to get out of the atmosphere. Then we sent an animal and then a human. It's the first time we've made it to an extraterrestrial landmass. We met with the internet, and we witnessed the shrinking of computers in terms of size and huge transaction volume. We have witnessed the incredible rise of artificial intelligence. Today, thanks to the fusion reaction, we are very close to getting rid of fossil fuels. But as you can see, we owe a debt of gratitude to the people who sacrificed themselves for the sake of science, although almost all the achievements have come in the last 150 years. We reached these places as a result of millions of hours of work by scientists. And we continue to move forward with all our strength. While we could not protect ourselves in the cave a few thousand years ago, we are now counting the days to make interplanetary journeys. There is a very important point here. So how did we get to this point? While our aim was to understand the universe until Newton, we tried to understand the laws of nature after Newton. Modern science has made us admit our ignorance that we know nothing yet. Mankind, an embryo compared to the world, has accomplished countless things in a short time, but he couldn't do one thing: to beat arrogance. Nobody knows those who oppressed and punished scientists such as Galileo, Copernicus, Pythagoras, Darwin, and Avicenna. But we science lovers remember these names when we hear them, and remember them with endless love when they are mentioned. We don't care what language, religion, or race you are. Galileo, one of the most famous victims of excommunication, is considered one of the most important scientists to shape modern physics. Einstein even calls him the father of modern sciences. There are very important lessons we can take from Galileo and other scientists. What arrogance can lead to. Maybe this is exactly what humans need to understand. We must put aside our arrogance and start listening to others. We should listen to understand, not to refute their arguments. Most of the organs we carry in our bodies exist in animals, including the brain. But our difference becomes sharper at one point, in the power of thinking. What makes us who we are is our ability to question. If we stick to every idea blindly, we will lose what distinguishes us from animals. Thought is our superpower. Being incredibly strong doesn't make you super strong. If you want to see them, you can go to a zoo. We have a lot of distant relatives there who managed to do these things but couldn't think. They may not even be aware that they have such a talent, because they have these traits since they are born. just like Homo sapiens. But we can fly thanks to our superpower. Thanks to our superpower, we can produce machines that are thousands of times stronger than we are. Thanks to our superpower, we can leave the world we were born in and go to other planets. So I ask you, what is the real superpower? Are your organs that you already have and cannot develop as talents? Or is it your superpower that gives you the power to turn fairy tales into reality? Composed of 78% water, 10% fat, and 8% protein, this strange substance will take us further. I hope you never lose your greatest superpower, because then the only difference between you and the people at the zoo is that one of you is behind the cage.